Hello, everybody. Welcome to the SketchCraft Morning Podcast, where I drink my coffee and I read stuff to you. So let's see here. Drinking my coffee, and now I'm gonna go ahead and get this going. It's time to get this going. All right, good morning, everybody. What day is it? What day is it? It's May 23rd. I think today's a Wednesday. You know, I lose track. I lose track. So I've got some Q&A stuff that's been building in my Instagram for about over a month. It's a pain. So I thought I'd go through this really quick. Let me start with Sketch EDD. Sketch_EDD sent me a question. And they ask, hello, sorry if I'm bothering you in any way. You are, but don't worry. Nah. Feel free to always ask me our questions, folks. I'll get around to it. But I have a question about using a digital drawing display tablet. How long did it take you to get used to drawing with one? I've had mine for a year, but I still can't get the hang of it. My lines are too thick, and my drawings are too squished. It almost seems like I have to teach myself how to draw again. That's a good question. So I'm going to start here in the morning podcast, and then I'm going to refer you to some videos that I've made. And then Sketch, if none of that helps in any way, shape, or form, then we'll take it to tier 2 support, which I can maybe do an art video. But on the YouTube channel, which by the way, folks, if you just type in sketchcraft.net, you go right to the my YouTube page now. So that's good. I have an art tips playlist, and inside that playlist are a few different videos that I would recommend. I tend to cover this subject a bit over and over again. But what I would start with is anything in there that has to do with, let me see, there's with silhouettes. There's art tips, fan help, composition, and drawing silhouettes. That's a good one. There's silhouettes part 2, the X-Men silhouettes. Anything with silhouettes in there, I'd start there. The reason why is what I found is when I'm drawing digitally, it's better to make a container. The idea is it's better to make a container to shove your art in. And so what I've done is I'll block things in a solid color like black. And then as I layer in items I want on a character, like a pose. So I got a character posing, like flexing. I'll actually sketch that out as a solid layer, like I'm looking at the silhouette, the shape of the character, their outline. And I don't make it too perfect, but I'll carve out edges. And if I want to give them a glove or something, I'll add it in another color. But it's all just blocked in a solid shape. Then I turn the opacity down and then build and draw right over there from center. And I get a lot of the details that way. That keeps things from being squished or weirdly proportioned. It keeps things contained. As for lines are too thick and drawings are too squished, here's a general rule of advice. I tend to these days like to draw, if I want a softer, smoother line, I tend to draw between 2,000 and 3,000 pixels wide, or 3,000 to 4,000 pixels wide if I don't want any aliasing. So what does that mean? It means that I used to draw at 600 DPI, and it would be like 6,000 by 8,000 pixels. So the DPI is kind of irrelevant when you're talking pixel width because it's kind of independent of that. So what would happen is I'd be drawing forever. I'd kill my fucking arm because you're creating a canvas that, as you zoom in, is basically like drawing the size of your wall. Literally the size of the wall in your room. So what I've done over the years, especially over the last year or so, is after working with a variety of different clients between video games and comic book art and magazines and t-shirts, is generally speaking, 3,000 to 4,000 pixels is enough space to get a pretty good line quality. I actually go a little softer for a lot of my stuff. I tend to go down to like 2,500 pixels by whatever the 3,000, so it's like 2,000 by 3,000. The reason why is it makes my lines a little softer, and then I just unsharp mask my lines in Photoshop or sharpen whatever in Clip Studio Paint, whatever you have. And so if I want it to be a little sharper, I'll do that at the end, and that sharpens up the lines. But the lower quality line has actually produced a more realistic result. You know, like it makes it look less digital. It's so weird. If you thank you Facebook. If you look at my recent Darksiders piece that I'm working on, like it's 11 by 17 print, but the line art is being done at around 2,000, 3,000 pixels by 150 dpi. I just upscale and sharpen when I'm done, and it looks fine when it prints. So when I'm working for clients who generally kind of like nitpick over things like that, then I work 3,000 by 4,000. I go up a little bit, you know. And look, it depends. I mean, some days I look at it and I go, well, I probably should have just drawn at 3,000 by 4,000 pixels. But what it does is it means that my brushes are usually 4 pixels for details and 8 pixels for outlines and thicker lines. And so it just keeps that drawing process fairly consistent. And I'm not zoomed in like at 300% the whole time because I'm seeing giant pixels. So it just means I can work at a more whatever resolution independent base. But the drawing digitally thing, yeah, it did take me a while. It took me a long while. Matter of fact, I got so I wanted to get a Cintiq in 2003 when they were first announced. And so they were going to be shown off at the SIGGRAPH the following year. So I was luckily in art college, and SIGGRAPH just happened to be coming to San Diego. SIGGRAPH's a big, if you don't know what SIGGRAPH is, it's a big like convention for technology, various kinds of technology. Stuff from, you know, video game engines, third-party licensed video game engines, to weird medical stuff, all sorts of things, technology-driven. At that year, they had been just showing off Massive, which was the big Maya module they made for Lord of the Rings to make all those dudes fight. That was a big thing. But I went down there. I volunteered because I couldn't get a ticket. It's like $1,000. But I volunteered since it was going to be at the convention center and since I was in college at the time and did volunteer work. So I got a free ticket, which gave me floor access when I wasn't volunteering. So when you're off, you can walk around the floor. And then I got to go use the Cintiq Generation 1. And Generation 1 was super bulky and not right. But I could see it was there. It was getting there. I was like, okay, so like within 5 years, I'm going to have to make the transition to digital drawing. For a multitude of reasons. One, I just really wasn't good with pens and inking and stuff. Plus, the writing was on the wall in terms of changes that were having to be made in art, constant changes, and traditional art wasn't getting there. So I'd already had a Wacom, you know, and Intuos. But I knew it was about 5 years away, so I was like, okay, whatever their version 2 or 3 is what I'll get in on. And sure enough, about 5 years later, 4 years later, 2008, I got my first Cintiq, which was the Cintiq 2. I think it was a 20 UX, whatever, UW, whatever that was, a 20. Sorry, guys. And I didn't get it just because, obviously, I had already seen, hey, I'm going to have to learn how to draw digitally. But I had this problem where I was getting this major carpal tunnel. I was drawing so much traditionally, my body, like the one thing I never accounted for after learning how to draw was, can my body actually deal with it? Like, what will my hand feel like after 16 hours of drawing every other day? So yeah, I wasn't doing well. And when I got the Cintiq, I'd gotten a job to draw two different comics, and I was working in gaming magazines. I was drawing Death Junior, a book called Monstroids, and then I was also doing artwork for Play Magazine full time. So, and they were like, "You got to ink all your own stuff, and you got to color." And I'm like, "Fuck!" So, I got the Cintiq because I knew I couldn't get professional looking inks on my own. I'd have to use Photoshop. So I got the Cintiq, and it took about a real, I think it says it's taking you a year. It took me a full year to work out a process. And my process was incremental. So the first thing I did was I tried to draw something completely digital and failed miserably. Then what I did was I got my sketches done traditionally, scanned them into Photoshop, composition, compose, like rescaled characters, composed, move things around how I like, right? Printed that out and did a rough sketch over that traditionally, but fast, not drawing super clean details, not pressing hard, and then I'd scan that back in and then trace that. And what I would do is clean the lines up and then just go over the lines digitally and clean up. So I use white to get rid of any aliasing, use the blacks to create thick and thin. My rough sketches, my rough lines were all one line width. There were no thick and thins, no clean anything. So I used Photoshop for about a year just to clean up those lines. And then what I would do is on certain panels, I would do a panel, I'd do something in the panel completely digital, and then I would do an entire panel digital. And then eventually I was able to draw all the characters in one line weight digitally and then ink it digitally. Now, it wasn't moving faster than when I did things traditionally. In some ways, it took a little bit longer, but I added the time up it would take between, me hiring an inker to do what I was doing, and that time averaged out. Now, obviously, it would have been faster to have an inker because they would be inking while I'm creating new pages, right? So a little bit of a fudging of numbers there. But the quality was there. And that was on the Monstroid stuff. If you go to my DeviantArt, type in Monstroids into the gallery. Matter of fact, I'm going to do that right now just so I can see. And folks, sometimes on the podcast, you're going to have to do a little bit of effort. You're going to have to go look stuff up, all right? I'll go into my gallery on DeviantArt. And you can get all my DeviantArt links straight from SketchCraft.com. It's got some DeviantArt links in there. So just type in Rob Duenas, Duenas, and it'll pop up. I'll go into my gallery. I'm going to type in Monstroid, Monstroid. We'll bring that up. And there's a few pages you can look at, but the first one, unused art, Monstroids, all these monsters, that's 100% digital. And if you go over to unused Monstroids 01, page 18 and 19, it's black and white. It's all this fucking detail. That's the first page I ever did 100% digital, in Photoshop. Now, at the time, there was a program called Manga Studio 5, which has since become Clip Studio Paint. And the buddy at my time was telling me how, like, you got to use this. This is the best thing to use. And I tried using it, but the thing is, man, I've been using Photoshop since 1994. So, like, the way Photoshop works is just how I work. I've tried for 10 years now to move to that other program, and I just can't get the hang of it. I'm getting more of a hang of it on my iPad. Literally last week, I just started using Clip Studio Paint on the iPad, even though it's $70 fucking a year. I put the money down and said, well, let's see if I can make it work here. And because I'm not using a keyboard shortcut on Manga Studio on the iPad, it makes more sense. The thing is, my hand is completely tied to a keyboard when I draw, and I do all these shortcut keys while I work. That's how I use Photoshop. So, I'm just not used. What do I say used to? Like, my brain's just wired to use Photoshop for this. But that all being said, the proportions drawing digitally, is really just a matter of creating containers and then building construction of those containers. And then the thickness of your line has to do with the pixel width. Also, I tend to draw with a round brush set to about 80% opacity. And if you're having jitters and you're using Photoshop, get lazy into Zoomy Pro, set it to, was it pressure gain, and turn the pressure down to about 8. You'll be good to go. You can crank it up if you want a smoother line, but 8, 6, between 6 and 8 is pretty good. If you're on Clip Studio Paint, just, you know, smooth the line out. So same difference. So go check all that stuff out. All that stuff. Get back to me. Let me know, Sketch, how it went for you. And, you know, we can always make another art tip video. Let's see what else we got. Where are we at? Where are we at here? We are at 16 minutes, so I got about another 10 minutes, 8 minutes. No, sorry. Bearded brushstrokes. Hey, ma'am. Don't mean to bother you. He has 2 questions. I'm going to answer the second one first, and if I got time, I'll answer the first one. The second one is, hey, man, don't mean to bother you, but thought maybe you could share some advice. Some things I'm struggling with are details in my drawings, especially when I'm done inking. Seems like the drawing loses a lot of noise when I officially finish inking. What are some ways I can focus on detail and give more noise to the drawing? Got any suggestions on how to practice this? Thanks in advance. If you mean traditionally speaking, depends. Like, I mean, cross-hatching. You know, if you're trying to do that, like, kind of McFarlane, Danny Meeke, Jonathan Glapian kind of thing, you just gotta think of the shapes 3-dimensionally and add extra details on top. I'll tell you this, the more you add that isn't in the original drawing, the more you're going to piss off other artists. If it's your own art, you're trying to build off of that, then, you know, man, like, personally speaking, when it comes to my inks, I tend to do shading with pencil and just scan it all in. You know, creates a lot of noise. Not easy to color that stuff, by the way. I would not recommend doing that for most people. I would say possibly maybe when you're inking, don't, whatever your lines are underneath your sketches, just leave some of that stuff in, man. You know, just leave some of the stuff in. Also, go buy an artist edition book of someone you really like. Like I have the artist edition for the Spawn, which is 11 by 17, so I can actually see what McFarlane's inks look like. And I have the artist edition for The Dark Knight Returns, so I can see what Frank Miller's worked, inked by Klaus Janson and a few other people. I can see what that looks like at size. I would recommend getting an artist edition, a couple of them, from whatever art that you tend to like really like, or you're kind of like the style you're kind of going for. And then at size, see what their art actually look like. Because I think sometimes too, we tend to think there's more in the art than there actually was, and we try to add stuff that isn't helping. You know, you can create this weird expectation for yourself that doesn't actually exist, if that makes any sense. Like, so you may be thinking you need more noise in the lines, and the fact of the matter is, you may have just been seeing shitty printing when you were a kid, and you're reading comics, and you're like, oh, that looks like it's super detailed. Come to find out, it isn't. It was just the paper textures you used to use. It's actually why I prefer the non-glossy paper. I prefer paper with tooth. Like, if you remember Spawn was printed on the super glossy paper, but the first couple issues weren't. It was a paper with some tooth on it. I prefer that. They eventually kept that kind of printing, but it was only for the Walmart editions. So half of my comics in the later run of Spawn were the Walmart versions because they were printed on the shittier paper, which I preferred. The noise in the pulp creates... It's so good. It's so good. And then we got time really quickly. Your first question, bearded brushstrokes, was you were wondering, you've been growing a lot in work, you've been having a hard time drawing faces. Do you have any practice, advice, and technique to help you develop faces? Man. You got to really think about your art three-dimensionally. So if you're having a hard time with that, do some 3D modeling on faces. Take some sculpting. You know, buy a really good statue, and rotate the statue. Trace over those photos, something that's really three-dimensional that you can move, rotate, and rebuild the faces three-dimensionally. Spend a good year just doing that. Female faces, male faces, dogs, whatever. Because once you get a handle on the shapes, then you can manipulate them, stretch and squash them for emotions and expression. Just looking at things, like, how do I say this? Looking at them and drawing them really isn't enough. You need to deconstruct, understand where the jaws are connecting up to the skull, how the ears connect to the head. And then, once you understand all that, then you can start to do shape play, which is where people go, oh, your proportions are weird, Rob. Like, no, I'm doing shape play. I'm taking these normal sized ears and I'm taking these ones and squishing them down, and I'm blowing the head up to create different proportions. And then, you want to be able to rotate them three-dimensionally when you're drawing, because if you're drawing comics or anything sequentially, you're going to have to move characters around. So, but my advice for drawing faces is no more than anything else is learn the shapes. I mean, on a face, I generally get the silhouette working, and then when I go to build the details, I build the nose out. I get the center first. It's always, look, anything you draw goes like this. Silhouette, find the center of the silhouette, the shape, and then build out from that center. You create the center, then you get all the base shapes, and then you add shapes on, just like sculpting, where you'd add on a nose shape and then an ear shape. But you need the center. Why? So you know where the viewpoint is, where the horizon lines are, where, am I going to draw more on the left, a little bit on the right, So anything I do follows a very simple pattern of silhouette, finding center, building shapes on top of that, turning the opacity down, adding in roughy details, and then if I want to clean it up, turning that opacity down and cleaning that up. So that's with everything. Man, we just blew right through that, didn't we? Alright, everybody, so I'm going to get back to work today. Darksiders coming up. Darksiders coming up today. Then I'm going to go see Solo on Friday. Alright, everybody. That's it. That's all I got. That's all I got. If you have any questions, send them to me directly. I will answer them. And if you would like to support the show in any way financially, go to shopsketchcraft.com. Go buy something. Go buy something. It really helps. It really does. And if you don't have any money and you want some support, then just like and share this stuff. You know what I mean? Tell your friends. Alright, everybody. Till next week. It is May 23rd, 2018, and I gotta go to work. I'm out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Peace.